Oh,
So, Aaron, how far are you from the coast?
uh, it is an hour and a half ferry ride. You know what? If you hadn't have asked, I would have been able to tell you this. I think it's 35 kilometers.
Ooh, okay. So that's a bit of a separation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I somehow I don't think that's quite right. Maybe it's 35 miles, but anyways, doesn't matter. It's much closer to Maine, anyways. Now I'm gonna have to go check my reference material and look that up.
It says, I'm Googling it as you speak. It
Yeah,
says
yeah, I'm on it. Yep.
35K from the coast of New Brunswick. Doesn't say
Is
how
it?
close to Maine.
Okay. All right. It is 35K. Okay.
Yeah, you were right.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
definitely closer to Maine.
Oh yes, definitely. Um, it's drive to the southern end of the island or the western side of the island, Dark Harbor, and you can almost always see Maine unless it's a
Hmm,
really foggy day. On a clear day, we can see Nova Scotia, but more often than not, cannot see New Brunswick.
That's
that's
really
fascinating.
funny.
Mm-hmm.
Nova Scotia is so much farther.
It refraction across the water. That's the
Mhm.
only thing I got on that one.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
So
So from Tatton's Corner, ferry over to Black's Harbor,
something like that.
something like that. All right. Well, let's say hello, everybody.
North head to Black's Harbor. North
Yeah.
head to Black's Harbor. Yeah.
All right. 2 minutes into it. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe we'll just give everybody a few more minutes and then we'll kick off this high gala event of the year.
Awesome.
Basically, it's an excuse to wear a plaid once a month, but
Oh, I
You
actually
don't wear
think I
that every
have
day?
that exact shirt, but I don't have it on.
there's always next month, Lori. There's
That's
always
right.
next month.
I'll have to dig it out.
You could just tattoo your whole body with like a skin,
Yeah.
and then you wouldn't have to wear it externally ever, right?
It would work in some circles.
Definitely.
Yeah, I hear you.
I was gonna tease him like probably the west side of Toronto, but we're not gonna throw dots and stones over Toronto just yet.
I don't know. It feels like a Leslieville thing. Think like Parkdale 10 years ago, maybe West End. Sure,
Got it.
not anymore.
You're trying to like push that out to Brampton or something like that, or
Someone said today they're from out east. I said, where? East of the DVP? They go, oh no, I mean like Nova Scotia. I'm like, okay. For someone downtown, east end of the city feels really far. That's because I didn't buy my first vehicle until I was 40. So, walking and biking, your sense of scale is a lot different.
it can be. I have met people from larger centers that, did not leave the city until they were in their mid 30s. They just lived within the city limits and did their thing and never went anywhere. And for me, it was just extremely odd because, you know, at a young age, I started traveling different places and worked in different places. So everybody has a different experience.
100%.
Okay.
What do you think,
Well,
Sean?
30 seconds and we'll kick this
Yeah.
off.
Timer's on.
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, here we go then. The first BS&BEER Canada show. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aaron Jones. I am a carpenter and builder in Grand Manan, New Brunswick, or on Grand Manan, New Brunswick, actually, because I live on an island. Why are we here? Probably the mid 2000s. I was researching something, ended up in a document for the National Research Center of Canada, It led me to something in the Building Science Corporation, and I went down this little building science rabbit hole. And I didn't stick with it steady. It was something I just picked away at till probably a little over 10 years ago. And I decided that no, like I really truly want to build better. I want to understand how we can make buildings more durable, more resilient. That was sort of what I wanted to do. Anyways, before I introduce anybody else here, we should just go over very, very quickly a couple of the rules of conduct. We had hoped to have it on display for you in the waiting room, but didn't happen. Our first little technical glitch of the show. Basically, be kind, treat everybody as you wish to be treated. Keep in mind that Canada is a vast country. We have a lot of different climate zones. Everybody builds differently. And quite often, to quote a friend of mine, we're all experts where we build. And we'll get into this a little bit later in the show. But if you haven't noticed, all the climate zones are on our little map of Canada here. And that indicates that if you live in one of those areas, you might build slightly differently. Just for example, I'm over in Nova Scotia, Sean's out in BC. Our wall assemblies are not going to be identical. I happen to be drinking where we go? A seasonal ale from Picaroons, a maple cream ale, and I'm going to hand this over to Connor Malloy.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be here. My name is Connor Malloy. I'm a second-generation builder. Really grew up in a building business with my dad. Runs a design build business in London, Ontario. I now live in Toronto. I've been here since I was 20, never left. And I think my background really is kind of from traditional carpentry and home building. Nothing we really built growing up was what we call high performance, but everyone in the company and on site really believed we built really great homes, great details. Learned how to bend brakes in Flash when I was 16. And I think my first inkling of building science came from wanting to build green and wanting to learn what that meant, learn how to be sustainable, and started to learn about pretty good house and passive house. And 10 years ago in Toronto, started working for a pretty progressive renovator. And we started renovate homes to sort of a deep energy retrofit level. Since then, I've moved on to teaching. The best part of my job, running at a company, was mentoring staff and teaching clients to help, make them have informed decisions. So I now teach full-time at George Brown College in Toronto. We're a skilled trade school downtown. We teach carpenters how to build homes, but also about envelopes, air barrier detailing, mechanicals, all the things we know as we build a system. So love to kind of champion, how we can educate ourselves and really make this a safe place to ask a lot of dumb questions every day. I tell my students I know 100% of nothing and 80% of most things. So if you have questions, this is a great place to come. Very knowledgeable people from across the country. Many people here I ask questions to all the time, including Lori about 10 minutes ago. So if you have questions, show up, ask, and we'd love to spend some time with you. Why don't we introduce this over to Lori? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think you're supposed to tell us what you're drinking.
Sorry, I'm too excited to talk about wall assemblies. I'm drinking Roman Candle. This is by a brewery called, there we go, won't focus.
Wow.
This is by Bellwoods Brewery downtown. They're downtown in Ossington in Toronto, so kind of like West End around Queen West. It's a lovely beer. So that's what I'm drinking.
Cool. All right. Well, my name's Lori Rand, and I'm not a builder, although technically I'm a certified passive house tradesperson, but you don't want me to build anything. I actually just have that designation so that I can teach. So I am a designer. I own a company called Habit Studio, and we design new build passive houses and deep retrofit, sustainable. Everything we do is sustainable. We work hard to promote the best choices we can with our clients. And for a long time, I've been an advocate for high performance building. Years and years ago, I used to have what is something that was sort of a modeled, I guess, on BS&BEER. I called it the pacifists, and I would invite people to my office and talk about Passive House stuff, and we weren't allowed to argue about whether Passive House Institute or FIAS was the right choice because I don't care. And so that was probably back in 2014, 15, 16. So this feels very cool to be hanging out with coast to coast talking about building science and enjoying beers. And I'm not having a beer. I'm having tea. Oops. It's 8 o'clock here. Everybody makes fun of me because I tend to like to go to bed early. So I didn't want to risk falling asleep on you guys by indulging, but I might switch over in a little while. Yeah. So I think that's all I want to say for now.
Awesome, Lori. I get to jump in, and again, I hope it's a nice tea. And again, great to have everyone here. For those that don't know me, I'm Sean Sainamore. I'm hanging out in on everyone's kind of right shoulder in that orange section of Canada, climate zone 4, Vancouver, British Columbia. Where as of May 1st, we are definitely building to a higher performing system here because we have the BC Energy Step Code. And as of May 1st, yeah, we're up to level 3. And we'll dive deeper into what that looks like and what we're doing out here. I've been involved in the kind of passive house movement out here in Vancouver. I feel like I'm kind of generation 2. A lot of individuals that have gotten a passive house kind of started either in 2008 to kind of like the 2012. I took the consulting course in 2014 and realized that I was going to be the builder. And so I didn't go for taking that lovely hard test that many of you might have taken. And then I realized that we had the tradesperson course available in 2017. And so kind of 2017, I really dove deep into the passive house world. I'm lucky that I had an opportunity to go to Europe and see a lot of amazing prefab methodologies all the way back to 2004 and even start off my career working in prefab companies. So I'm always interested in resilient prefab passive houses, and had the opportunity to start teaching and educating local builders here in Vancouver at BCIT, which is our local technical school. And again, if you're ever in Vancouver, let me know because I'd love to show you that facility. We had Aaron in town last week and got to give him a whirlwind. Again, what's happening over George Brown is as excellent as what we have here. And again, it's great to see that more technical schools across Canada are scaling up. I know that both Alberta at either NAIT and SAIT are doing have an excellent program. And so it's just great to see that the tradesperson programs across Canada being ramped up with either, instructors that are personally wanting to improve the system or with the help of Passive House Canada and the tradesperson program they have there. So just a lot of great stuff happening. And so, yeah, now I'm at a spot where I'm back to being a builder with Clay Construction, where we've got about 6 projects underway. And what we can do to kind of help move things forward is not only build to Step Code 5, which is our building code, which will be in effective 2032. So I feel like I'm always in the future. At least now there's a bit of a deadline of where I'm moving towards. So super excited to be here with you all. You might have seen me on with the Passive House Accelerator. And if you don't get it, I will give you the sip of Passive House. And then if you like it, we bring out the mug and the jug. And then after that, the fire hose comes out. And so that being said, is the beverage that I am enjoying is the Whistler Brewing Beer Paul Honey Lager. That's what was right in front of the fridge that I grabbed. I might have a couple others in the hopper, but this is what I'm diving into now. So staying local, but I've gone Bear Country up in Whistler.
Right on, Sean. Thank you very much. Just briefly wanted to say hi to a few of our guests. Hi to Dave, Leo, Luke, Michael, and Robert. And there's a few other that I don't know. Also, I should mention, and I meant to mention this earlier, I am extremely grateful for my friends here. I had this idea. I wanted to put this show on. I didn't really know how to do it by myself. I reached out to Sean. Sean was extremely supportive and helpful. Connor came on board and really helped a lot with the technical stuff, which I am horrible at. And then I managed to convince Lori to like kind of round us all out and bring us all together. So just really grateful people, and I appreciate you all, just so you know. And then
To
I
be
guess
clear, it was just because it's past my bedtime.
well, either way, I'm very grateful you're here. I should mention we're kind of on the tail end of wallassembly.com. Maybe for those people who may not be familiar with it that are here, maybe Connor, you could kind of really quickly bring us up to speed, and that could segue into our next question.
Yeah, totally. So a few years ago, we collaborated with Travis Brungart down with KC BS&BEER, sorry, BS&BEER KC in Kansas City. They'd created a competition during the initial lockdown to kind of bring people together and discuss what they're building and how their walls go head to head, just have a discussion around assemblies. We thought, what a great way to have building trade students and architectural students across North America come together and submit ideas for assemblies that they're thinking about or they're learning about in class. And many schools, design, fashion, have these big shows. You can show their work. They feel for like their nerdy students, like my students who are designing assemblies, where do they go and get celebrated? So we created this competition 3 years ago. It's in its third year. Submissions are due last week. Mike Kanoki is here, who is a judge this year. So we have 10 selected entries. We are covering climate zones 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we have 10 students from across North America who have submitted that were selected for judging. So they're not being judged on sort of 6 criteria: durability, buildability, performance, cost, life cycle analysis. Really, can you take it apart? Can you renovate it? Can you change it? And then, of course, embodied carbon. So those students can use that lens that you use on your own projects and put that on their own assembly. Final show is June 7th. We're co-hosted by Fine Home Building. You can learn more at wallassembly.com. But this year, through our sponsors, including Huber, I know Robert's here, we vote $20,000 US, which is 80,000 Canadian, to give to students. So sponsors are so generous this year that we had more than we needed for just the awards. We have about $8,000 in scholarships. So students have written scholarship letters, and our goal is to support them for training, learning, education, and whatever their goals are. So the apps update, learn more at wallassembly.com.
Yeah, which has got to be the best, website you guys were able to figure out. That it's just so easy, slick, and just such a good thing. And again, Connor, you've done such a great job with the tech and doing that whole event, and so cool to see all the people, like all the sponsors, the industry really support you guys in making sure there's some money and some incentives for the students to get on board. Otherwise, it's a really cool initiative. So thanks for putting all the hard work in there with you and Travis. It's great.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
should mention
it's super fun.
Sorry, I should mention it really is students. Was it last year high school students won, or was it the year before?
So year one was won by a high school student. At that point, I think Dylan was 17.
Yeah.
And then in the second year, it was won by a university student from Oregon. But they were in their first year. And this year, again, high school students are doing really well. Really, I mean, what's so cool about this is one of the entries is from 2 high school students I think they're from Virginia. They're in a technical school, but they're just learning CAD drafting, and they've stayed after class and learned more about assemblies and put this together. So they learned CAD to draw. They delved deep into the records of Green Building Advisor and Fine Home Building to learn about details, and then drew their first assembly. It's super cool. And these kids are 16 years old. And I think what's really fun about this is the first year, it wasn't won by students in 4th year architectural studies. It was by a high school student from Brooklyn. So I think it's all to say, it's not about where you are or what you know. It's really about, does your wall, does your assembly, does your building science, does it fit what you want to build, given your labor market, your materials, and your approach? So yeah, it's really cool to see everyone get celebrated.
Awesome stuff. Really is.
Yeah, can't wait to see who gets crowned.
I know. Yeah, looking forward to it. June 7th.
So maybe we should throw the question out to the audience about wall assemblies. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, as we all know, or maybe we don't know, multiple different climate zones right across Canada, and everybody has probably a wall assembly that fits their environment better than others. So, what is the go-to wall assembly in your market? What is like the code minimum wall assembly? And then, like, if you'd like, what's your ideal wall assembly? What would be what you would love to build if material budget wasn't an option? Or, sorry, wasn't an issue.
Well, ladies first, of course, right?
Well, all right. So I don't think I said when I introduced myself, but I am based in Halifax in Nova Scotia, and we do projects kind of all over Nova Scotia and a little bit outside. And a code minimum residential wall here is just a straight up 2x6, 16 inches on center with bad insulation. Um, what's funny about that, I think about this a lot. It's when I first started doing my job, which was sometime in the 1990s. Nova Scotia had our own energy code, and we had to meet that code. We actually had to put at least 1, if not 2 inches of rigid foam on the outside of our 2x6 walls. And so we had, classic plastic sandwich essentially. And, sometimes when I have nothing else to worry about late at night, I think about, are all those walls I did at the beginning of my life rotting away. So when Nova Scotia, when the National Energy Code became part of the NBC, we actually, in terms of thermal performance, stepped down and went backwards. So it's kind of weird to me. So that's the wall we do on a code minimum building. On our passive house projects, they range. I think that our go-to wall is about our 40 to 45, something like that. It varies a little bit. And usually I use, good old-fashioned cellulose, but I am very excited about maybe using hemp or actually, future, very big future state, but we did a little experiment in my office before Christmas. We got a very tiny grant to grow mycelium and see what that would be, what would take to do that. And so we set up like a little space in my office that was supposed to be isolated. And we started growing mycelium panels, and eventually one of my drafters started having some allergies, and we realized that we had not been very good about keeping it contained, and we ended up moving it to a lab. But it grew, it did it, and I'm like, it's the future. We can do it. We can grow insulation and not have to use foam. So yeah, so that's my very future state dream. But anything that's low embodied carbon, I'm all over it.
Connor, do you want to go ahead?
Well, I can jump in there.
Yeah, well,
I was
Sean,
just
if
going
you-
to say the same thing.
So, well, yeah, how about we go from east to west then? So, how about Aaron, you share next, then I'll go Ontario, and then we'll go.
So, because I was beginning my career around the same time as you were designing houses in the 90s, Lori, I know because some of the training I had in the military, we referenced the work that Nova Scotia was doing at the time with R2000. So it was 1 inch of foam. I remember this distinctly because at that point in time in my career, in my life, I'd never seen anybody put foam on the outside of anything. And then very shortly after, I built a straw bale building, but that's another story. um, anyways, so code minimum for us typically is 2x6, some type of R20-ish bad insulation, and 1 inch of foam. That's sort of code minimum. A typical wall assembly for us is, at least in the past few years, is R9 zip with either rock wall in a 2x6 cavity or cellulose in a 2x6 cavity. We don't use cellulose very often, not because we don't like cellulose, but because it's not necessarily repeatable where I live. Living on the island, we don't have a dense pack cellulose installer just hanging out. Even though I have dreamed of becoming my own dense pack cellulose self-performing everything, which would just be one more thing I would have to self-perform. But like, I can't compete with growing my own insulation, although maybe I should start thinking about that on the island, just grow my own insulation. And here I thought wood fiber was kind of cutting edge for North America. It has to be repeatable and it has to be durable. Those are like my two rules for any wall assembly. If you can't repeat it, you're not going to be able to gain efficiencies or figure out the little nuances of things you could have done better. So for right now, we're just going to stick with mostly probably R9 zip panel and rock wool in our stud cavity. But if sky was the limit and nobody told me what I could or couldn't use, I would be looking at going outboard with a lot of wood fiber, just because I don't know how to grow mycelium yet, but I'll look that up when the show's over. But yeah, like R12, R18 of wood fiber on the outside, just something with a beautiful rain screen, and everything extremely well flashed. It's kind of important to me to if you can't keep water out, it doesn't matter, and that's sort of a big deal to me. Got to keep water out. Insulation, energy efficiency is really important, but if we can't hit resilient and durable, it really doesn't matter.
Well, maybe that's a good segue. I'll hop in there because, understanding how we build, I mean, BC, where it rains a lot, especially here in Vancouver, I mean, that water, the bulk water is the first thing we need to look at. And then kind of like the priorities is making sure we have air tightness. Then we look at the, vapor control layers, and then we get into insulation. And it's funny because when the city of Vancouver, about 6 years ago, kind of in the earlier adoption of the step code, they jumped in like, oh, we need to build everything to an effective R22 wall. Well, I mean, that meant that every builder just went to a 2x8 wall because it was just easier and think about of thicker wall that makes more sense. But again, if once we start looking at the building science and how the walls need to dry out, there's a lot more insulation. And we also have our sheathing layer that, of course, is going to be at the dew point. And so now that, that structural element is being affected by the elements. And that's where, you start to look at wall assemblies and again, material choices, using 2x8s, there's not as many big trees as there used to be. And so we're relying on a system. And I'm also part of Haven, which is the local home builders of Vancouver here. And we have an education technical committee that I'm a part of. And even within that, there's a subcommittee that's kind of like the real technical nerds. But this group of technical nerds had like their own small group. And in that was a gentleman named Mark Govin, who had his own research lab out here, and he was working with Joe Steebrook on a bunch of stuff. And so they were doing tests here in Vancouver of just, how well will a wall perform if it just had 1 inch of extra insulation? And by even having the 1 inch, the dew point was outside of that foam or whatever the insulation was. And so the condensation on the plywood and the durability of the plywood was just so superior. So I've always been a fan of the split insulated wall where, the structure's on the inside and then we put the sweater on, or, now we have the term outsolation is happening. And then I was always intrigued by the double stud wall. And if we have our roots back to, the good old Saskatchewan house and the roots of Passive House, the stuff that Harold Orr was doing there with double stud. And so I kind of thought that using smaller wood, using cellulose was a nice wall. But in BC, we don't have as much cold as you guys have out there. And so I kind of had this bit of a rule talking to people is like, west of the Rockies, you kind of went with a split insulated wall, and then east of the Rockies, you went with a double. And again, all about preference and looking at things. But when we're looking at where the air tightness layers are, that continuity of the air barrier, where does insulation go? What type of insulation? We get on all those fun things. And literally just got a text a moment ago from Timber HP that they've got wood fiber insulation blown in, being manufactured and coming off their line. So it's great to see that we are having other options. I appreciate Laurie about your mycelium project, because I've heard some great stories about that. And again, now that we have a lot of hemp fiber here in BC with the policy changes with that, there's definitely more fiber to be used from a organic standpoint. So I think we're now aware of it, and I think also too just technology. I mean, like I said earlier in my intro, I mean, I started diving into Passive House 2014. Well, literally, it's been 5 years where we had our kind of first carbon leadership forum meeting here in Vancouver, and that whole group, and talking about embodied carbon, and kind of realizing the great research that Chris Magwood has put on about that particular subject, and realizing how we need to balance and have a good understanding of our embodied carbon as well as our operational carbon. And so when you start to look at the walls and start making choices, and then also trying to ensure you've got the layers in the right spot. So yeah, out here, I do like a split insulated wall, but I got to take it one more step because I love prefab. And so looking at a thick wall, Bryn from Lane Fab out here has his tagline is, thick walls are sexy. And so I definitely agree with that, that particular tagline, because, moving away from our traditional method. And so either keeping our 2x4 walls from, the 1900s as traditional, and then putting a sweater on, great. But even if we can eliminate that 2x4 surface cavity and make it even just a 2x2 or 2x material on a flat. For those that may have not met Chris Hill from B Collective, I've turned into a big fan of his BOSS system, which is building offsite sustainable systems, because it's free, it's open source, and he really put a lot of research into how to create a prefabricated wall system that we all could adopt and, in a sense, start our own prefab factories. So, that wall assembly that he talked about is a 2x2 surface cavity with wood that was originally from a deconstructed house. And so you're not even using old wood, you're using, using new wood, you're using old wood that has been cut down. And then they're using 2x4s and a kind of a Larson truss, filled with cellulose. And so, looking at a 9.5-inch system that's storing cellulose. And so, when we're looking at our walls and looking at thicknesses, and it's kind of like R20 in the slab, R40 walls, R60-80 roofs, and then like R10 windows is kind of always the goal. And in Vancouver, we kind of hit a sweet spot about an R32 and R36 for, our walls. So we don't need to go as thick as what you guys need to do, where you got a lot more variation and temperature swings. So that orange section that we have right over here, right over there, is where we can dial down our sweater details, but we still need a good sweater. So.
Well, I love to say that we are with you, Sean. Ontario is, I think, a unique place, and Toronto is a very unique place within Ontario. We're very lucky in a few ways. We're a big market. We have access to a lot of materials. We have great suppliers. There's reps locally in town from SIGA 475. Robert's always around. I just met some others at Boots on the Ground. So the diversity of what's available is pretty plentiful. That leads to a lot of diversity, but probably the mainstay, if you drive through small town Ontario or up around Collingwood, where we spend a lot of time, it's from OBC SP12. There's different compliance packages. So as a builder, you could choose package A, B, C, D, and keep going. Sorry, A1, A2, A3, A4. Only one of the SP12 packages, which were updated in 2017, you had to sort of increase, your levels of insulation. Only one category does not require you to use continuous insulation. So it's interesting when you drive through a lot of these larger developments, a lot of them using that table. It's the least costly wall to build. The caveat is you have to have a furnace with a higher efficiency rating, right? Gas burning furnace. And that's what they're choosing to do. So that's the bulk of it. Now, I sort of like mid-tier progressive builders are building on that, as Lori said, that kind of R2000 model. It's still a 2x6. It has an R22 bat. They're adding between 1 inch of EPS or 2 inches of XPS on the exterior. So definitely moving in the right direction. And then there's this whole sort of gamut of sort of high performance builds. We have a lot of growing panelized builders, not as much as Sean maybe out west, but there's 3 that I know in Ontario. And they're doing everything from renovations, additions, laneway suites. We luckily also have Canada's largest CLT manufacturer, just 2 hours west of Toronto. So pretty amazing diversity what we see in the city. But I think what it comes down to us, I'll speak from the Toronto perspective. Lots here are very interesting. We have lots here that are, my neighbor's lot next door to me is 16 feet wide. So when they build a laneway suite, they'll be looking at what is the thinnest wall I can build that meets these performance criteria. Yes, I have goals in building to pretty good house standard, or I've heard of passive. That's interesting to me, but can I give up an extra 4 or 5 inches of that interior space? Because we're in climate zone 5A, and just north of the city, it's climate zone 6A. So it does really bulk those things up. So for us, we see a lot of sort of base building, and I think we're excited by the diversity of what's coming, and education from Passive House Canada doing more tradespersons courses, FIAS moving up here and having some projects, and really pushing the envelope. So a lot of simple things, but I think there's a lot of interest to build better, and that's why we're here today to have that discussion.
Yeah, Connor, it's funny just to talk about the, the cheapest wall. And when I was talking to builders, we had get in the conversation of you always want to build the thinnest wall, the cheapest wall, the highest R value. And then if you care about the planet, you worry about the embodied carbon. Really, those are like the 4 constraints that we hear about all the time when we're looking at it. And I mean, it's great that we have choices in the industry. I think this is what's great about our about the logistics and the products and manufacturers is there's a lot of great products that are out there for people to choose. And so as we're improving or as we're different things, that choice is still an opportunity for people to work through things and then have great conversations about it. If you do it differently, great, that works for you and you figured out a solution and now you're trying to improve those systems. But again, it's nice that we have choice, but that whole kind of conversation about those 4 points always starts to streamline the conversation about not only our wall assemblies, but our basements and our roof and our windows. And so, again, great to see the diversity across Canada. I mean, it's funny too, because of course, 90% of Canadians live across the 49 parallel, and then 1/3 live in that panhandle of Ontario. So when they say Toronto is the center of the universe, kind of does make sense math wise. But it's that green section that is all above our shoulders that makes it challenging. And I think we've got Mike Kanoki, who was here earlier, and again, he's definitely in the Great White North of things, trying to make a wall assembly work for his cold climate.
And I think it really does go back to diversity. I mean, Connor's talking about lots 16 feet wide. Most of the places where I build here on the island are you 3 meters away from the property line? Good, go ahead. And if it fits between the east, west, north, south boundaries of that lot, then it's mostly a non-issue. And yeah, and then we had a chance to stop at that B Collective when I visited you in Vancouver and see that great project.
Yeah.
And just so many different things. But before I forget, we should probably talk about this person down below here. You never know where you're going to find them. Anchorage, Dallas, Los Angeles, Boston, the Big Nickel, Vancouver, Halifax. It's our foreign correspondent, Mark Willie.
I would like to give a formal toast to Lori, Connor, Aaron, and Sean. This is quite wonderful. I wish I was at Timmy's right now. But I love your backgrounds. It is just brilliant what you have going on there. And I missed the beginning of the discussion, but you know what? I'm gonna dive right in after this. I'm gonna see what I missed, because the voices you guys carry always deliver news that I want to hear about, experiences that I haven't quite been a part of, and the discovery of what other people know and share is just amazing. So really happy that it's the four of y'all doing BS&BEER Canada, eh?
Love it, bud. So, I mean, you travel a lot. You get to see a lot of different buildings across your path. I mean, recently you were in the OG of Las Vegas, in Las Vegas, New Mexico. What are some of the walls systems that you've seen along your travels? And if you want to just share some of like maybe a couple of the walls that you liked seeing on different projects, and how you've seen them benefit the builders and the clients and everything else.
Just before Mark kicks this off, just before he does, question for you, Mark. If you have a panelized wall on a trolley and you're using said trolley as a skateboard and you exceed 45 miles per hour in Las Vegas and a Teamster stops you, what happens?
You try to go faster and see if they can catch up. That's a true life story of Aaron and myself and Jonah Stanford. We did get caught. We did get reprimanded. And if given the chance, I would do it again.
Yeah. Our cart got impounded.
Yeah, they impounded the cart, which impacted people after us. So all is fair in love and construction. Projects I like seeing from a wall point of view. It certainly is without budget in mind. I first like to forecast. My favorite new word is longevity of the wall. Whatever the buzzword we're picking up on is probably applicable to use in most conversations, but the longevity of the wall really eliminates finagling about what did we use or the price of what we used. It's having more of a European mindset of saying, how long is it going to work, and how well is it going to last versus how much does it cost? Cost is a question, but it's not the pertinent question. So in most cases, I certainly like the wall that responds to its region, right? Meaning understanding what it will be occurring, be it rain, sleet, snow, vapor. And then I like it to also include, when possible, some sort of radiant barrier as well, and venting for those materials that might be sacrificial to be easily repaired while the performance factor isn't devalued. So in many cases, what does that mean? That means continuity between all the layers, and that means a very thick facade, quite a bit thick facade, which I like window wells and I like to sit on them. So make that wall fat. That's not to say I don't know what Connor is working with. Our lots in Chicago are 25, which means 3 feet on one side, 2 feet on the other. Typically 2 to 3 layers of gypsum in addition to non-combustibles. But, if you're in a region that's a little bit more open, then do what you can. And when you can, try and build it in the off season where you can. So when the weather lightens up, you could deliver that baby and install it on the double.
Great answer, Mark. I thought you were going to pull out the first "it depends" card of tonight's session, but no, you dove right into it. So that's very admirable. I was going to give you the "it depends," but no, you caffeine loaded with your double, and you're firing on all cylinders tonight.
I would like to add that this was mailed to me by Gina Hoyt. So Gina, if you're out there, you're a special one. And thank you kindly. Cheers to you.
She's closer than you think, Mark.
It's funny, Mark talked about cost, and Connor and I had, well, part of our discussion last night was actually about the cost of building. And sometimes, or maybe it was just me venting to Connor, I'm not sure. But quite often we'll encounter people who will talk about return on investment in a structure. And you cannot look at something that should last hundreds of years and expect a return on it in the next 20. At least I don't think that's how we should be looking at it. We should be looking at, I'm building a legacy here and it's going to be passed on. And I think Mark is right. We do have to change our mindset a little bit when it comes to, I'm going to use the culture of building in North America. Deep thoughts from Aaron Jones.
Love it. Well, I mean, Aaron, it's really interesting you talk about the culture, because I know a lot of us in the last few years, we're trying to figure out the language. We went pretty nerdy either the passive house or some of the deep building science stuff, and so bringing it back. And I mean, this is kind of what we're trying to do here tonight. And every time that BS&BEER Canada shows up, is how do we get the our community to understand the language that might be pretty technical, could be pretty nerdy, but realize that the building science is clear, it's concise, it's repeatable, and we can be able to move forward with some of these decisions. And yes, that change is upon us, because as kind of I said in a lot of times, is we're really good at building cabins with kitchens and like fancy kitchens and bathrooms. Now we need to be putting on the right layers of our assemblies and make sure that they're more robust and last 200 plus years. And that will matter in how we talk about and communicate to individuals here and to the rest of the community that we reach out to and talk to.
And I'm hoping we can dispel as we go along here some of the misconceptions and myths that building better doesn't necessarily mean more money. There's a lot of choices depending on your wall assembly where you're talking minimal at expenditure, sometimes even saving you money if you understand where you're building and what is the goal? What are you trying to achieve with this building? And the other thing we have to be aware of with climate change is typically in Canada, we talk heating degree days, heating degree days, heating degree days. And I'm in 6A, and I haven't quite got a line on my actual heating degree days exactly in my fixed location, but I suspect that I am nowhere near a 6A. I'm probably like a 6, maybe even a 5B, and climate change is happening. So are we going to hit a point where there's a balance where we live between heating and cooling degree days? I think that's probably already being experienced in some locations in Canada. And you got to look at your wall differently, because we've spent years, decades, looking at, this is a cold climate. We're trying to control vapor from the inside only and keep the cold out. But now in the summertime, we're introducing cold air inside our building, and it changes where that vapor is going. It changes how our walls act, how the whole building acts, actually.
I like how you said dispelling the myth and then right with the phrase building better. Because I hear a lot of people's response to building better is they think that that means new construction, and it doesn't. Building is the work that is being performed on an existing building, the additions to existing buildings, and new construction. Building better is comprehensive of the actions being taken by the industry and the manufacturers to make the transformation.
Well, then to clarify, what I will say, I think building better means, and this is just my personal opinion, is I'm going to take the budget that I have, whatever that is, whether it's $1 or $1,000,000, and I'm going to take this project, whether it's a new build or it is an addition or some type of renovation, and we're going to do the best we can in that given situation with the money we have. So are we going to be able to upgrade the insulation? Ideally, yes. Are we going to be able to improve durability? Are we going to be able to fix the flashings? Are we going to be able to make sure we keep water out? Ideally, yes. Those are the first, couple things. Let's make it durable. Then we'll make it pretty, comes last. But I know there's a fine balance there that we all have to follow. But I've always been in the function first camp. If it doesn't function, it doesn't matter. I've said that for a very, very long time. And I think we really have to go back to that, keeping the water out, keeping the heat in, managing our air is more important than the fancy floor, the fancy countertop, the fancy cabinets. Look after the structure, look after the water management, look after the energy, and it's really easy to change your floor, change your countertop, upgrade your cabinets afterwards. Fix the things that are hard to fix in the beginning.
I just want to jump in and just say I agree wholeheartedly, except it's really hard. I just pulled a quick stat up. So I used to work in renovation. This is where a client would buy someone else's house. Then they go, oof, that's ugly. Rip that out, change that, right? Do what is for them, because in their point in time, their current needs are the most important. It's why they're making a change. It's why they've hired you to build a house. And I just pull a stat off of, it's probably really helpful, off of Zolo, but it's from the Canadian Association of Accredited Mortgage Professionals, that Canadians will own between 4.5 and 5.5 homes in their life, and move on the average every 7 years. So part of what I find is a struggle, as putting my builder hat back on again, is when I have a current client, I want to talk to them about investing in the envelope and the durability of the structure. But if you go back to How Buildings Learn, if you've ever, of course it won't show up here. So I got my camera. How Buildings Learn by Stuart Brand. There's this concept called shearing layers. This idea that the layers of the home change at different frequencies. So the stuff, the space, the interior, what your client lives in changes the highest frequency. So think like kitchens, bathrooms every 15, 25 years, right? That's what their visceral experience of the home is that. It's not the wall. Once you drywall it, that's gone. So how do we get them to care about the part of the building that they will never see and only the next 7 to 10 to 12 owners will benefit by? It's like, I almost had this idea of, yes, you have a private client, they're building a custom private residence. Really what they're building is a piece of public architecture, because it'll be lived in by 10 to 12 families. So how do you get them to change their mindset between building their own sexy custom house to house for others that they happen to live in part-time? And it's this conversation we need to have between, yes, I know we have this discussion around, okay, don't do the granite, spend it on insulation, but that's really hard, because can you feel R22 to R28? I don't know, maybe. But can you see granite and tell your friends about it and experience it? I think you can. So I think it's worthwhile discussing, how we actually sell people on these ideas. And by sell, I mean lead them to making an informed decision about investing in an envelope and being honest about how hard it is. because it's not easy.
I,
I,
I
oh,
go ahead, Bart. Go ahead.
well,
I'll
I
chime
would
in
just,
after.
I would jump in on that because I think it's really important what you're saying, and it's really true. Um, I think we have like two kind of cultural things going on with respect to, residential buildings and in specific, whether it's new builds or renovations. But, we have kind of like, even I do it, but like we're marketing via beautiful pictures of just like level up every time we got to level up. Um, but what we actually need to do is, if we build a house to, a pretty good house or passive house, and we make people feel the comfort, feel the difference, feel the healthiness of having fresh air, and they'll come to value that. They're not going to move away from it. They're not going to down level from like feeling good to the next house. And so, I mean, like what we try to do is like make people love their house so much that they're never going to move, and are like as a sustainability strategy in our business, and it doesn't always work, but like that there needs to be a cultural shift away from, oh, we build a house and, it's 15 years old and all this shit's breaking. So now we're going to go build another house because we don't want to deal with the cheap house that we built. Like it's a very frustrating issue. And I mean, we're all part of the solution, but talking about it's really important because it can be better.
I agree it can be better. And Connor, you are 100% right. These are some of the most difficult discussions that you have before you've even begun the project. You're sitting down, you're getting to know the client, and you're trying to explain, where you're at and what you want to build for them. And, it's education, 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 and find that balance, because you're not going to reach that same level of understanding with every client, because people are all different. Some people you can hand them a pretty good house book and they're going to read it and they're going to be all in. Others are going to want to take that pretty good house book and they're going to go to the next level. They're going to be like, how close to passive can we get? Can we go to passive? And there's going to be other people that like, no, just like whatever the cheapest windows, cheapest walls you can give me, but I want, the 24 karat gold plated faucet with, travertine imported from the little island off the coast of Milan, and that sort of stuff. And where do we find that balance? I honestly don't know. We've been fortunate in recent history to have some really good clients, but everybody's experience is different and every market is different. It depends what you're building. If your market is, building tract homes in the latest subdivision, it's really hard to have these discussions and make those gains beyond code. So I guess that's part of the reason I'm here, is how do we move forward from here?
I just want to go quickly back to a comment that Luke made earlier. It talks about sounds like your current property, Luke, and your dream is like mine. Your dream assembly is just give me one that's properly built. Amen. Give me lower thermal bridging, 100%, proper air sealing, and well implemented bulk water and moisture management details. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, right? I think this idea of the one thing I think is quite pivotal right now moving forward is making a safe place to test our buildings. In Ontario, we are not required to complete an airtightness test of any completed building. From a $200,000 condo to a $15 million property, there's no requirement. And I think I had a colleague actually ask me last week, is like, could you come and do a blow door test with us? But can you not tell anyone what it is? Like, I if it's really bad, I don't want anyone to know. And I'm like, it's okay. It's like saying I've never taken my blood pressure. I don't know whether I need to consult or not, right? We need to make it a safe place to test and make that a discussion piece. I think if we start to test and do more than just heat loss calcs, which is just what you're going to build, but pay for an energy model with a couple scenarios. What happens when I invest in a different fenestration package? What happens when I change from 1 inch of exterior insulation to 2? What happens when I X, Y, and Z? I think having that presented to a client to make informed decisions, or for us to learn the impact of these decisions, is important. And when we build, measure your success. You can see when a miter is not working in a kitchen because it's visible. Airtightness is not visible. And I think we need to come to a place where it's not required, but to get better and build more durably, we need to test, make it a safe place to go. Ooh, it's ACH 5. That's okay. Next time we'll get to 4, and then 3, and then 2, and then 1, and then 0.6.
We actually had a brief conversation about blower door tests last night as well. So funny story. Our most recent build, we've been below passive, like well below 0.6 ACH 50. And the energy auditor showed up and did the test and got a 1. So last night I was like freaking out a little bit. Not because 1 is bad, because anything below 1 is actually a very, very, very good number. But my brain was processing, okay, somewhere I've got a hole about yay big. What happened? Where did this go wrong? Fortunately, Gina was there and she took a picture of the nanometer. The volume was incorrect. It was missing about 8,000 cubic feet. Because that was what was really throwing my brain off, is the CFM wasn't that far off, but the ACH was out to lunch, and the energy auditor brought up temperature. We are going into the weeds here, folks. I'm sorry. That temperature could throw the blower door off. And I'd heard of this, but not to that extent. So I happened to be talking to Connor, brought it up to him, and during the course of our conversation, Gina solved the problem, and I was able to sleep last night.
I love that brings you stress in your life. I love that about you.
Yeah.
It does.
Hey, babe, pull up the pictures of that manometer on your phone. That's right.
And
My whole phone is puppies and kids, so that's awesome. Good for you.
there are things, and I know not everybody's this way, but I have literally woke up in the middle of the night because something is tripping in my brain, had to get up, put shoes on, go to the truck, get the plans out of the truck, come back, sit down, go over whatever detail and go, did that right.
Yeah.
Then go back to sleep. Can't help it.
Well, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but I mean, this is where I got to default to, the Gord Cook's line about the dumb tax is, why I'm here today is to share my experiences, my knowledge, so that we ideally can talk about the lessons learned, the hardships and mistakes, so that our, followers and friends in the industry can not make the same ones and learn from us and use the right tools and systems and be able to make these higher performing buildings come to their market sooner, faster, because they didn't have to worry about those extra mistakes that occur the costs. And so, here in our market now, we're kind of projecting that high performance buildings cost 2% more, but that just means like the construction loan is 2% more, the energy is lower, and so the clients at the end of the day, when they're paying bills at the end of the month, it's zero. And so being able to try to really reduce the cost of this high performing stuff, because all we're doing is just changing budget line items. You're, instead of spending your money on your radiant floor, your furnace, and your boiler, or mechanical systems that are going to need a lot more maintenance, you're now putting your money in the envelope and better windows and things that don't need so much maintenance. And so we're not asking you to increase the budget. We're just saying, let's just play around with the line items and have a conversation about that intentionality and what you need to be on. And this is why we're gonna have lots of fun in our third Thursdays of the month. So it's great stuff.
Just to add to that, also when we're talking to clients or prospective clients, we really have to add that line item in, is cost of ownership.
Yeah.
You know, and Connor, you've already touched on this, is like, where does that extra inch of foam bring you to? Like, where does that go to? So, and I know banks don't always see it this way, and sometimes that's an issue, but if we can lower your utility bills by, you know, $150 a month for the next foreseeable future, whether you live there past 7 years or not, we don't know, but it's still a factor. And maybe that allows you to go to a little more exterior insulation or a better window. And the other thing we haven't talked about is provincial incentives. We just about all of us have some type of provincial incentive, and depending on what your energy model is and where that will take you to, sometimes that will pay if you nail your blower door number and you get the right assembly. Um, that will pay for that extra exterior insulation. That will pay for a slightly better window. Uh, all things to look at and take into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, right now in Vancouver, if you go to passive house certification or certified net zero, you're getting 16% extra FSR on your single family home and 18% on a duplex. Right. And so, I mean, that's some of the numbers here in Vancouver. And then now we have ZEBEX, which is our kind of center of excellence, has even given out funding for embodied carbon. And so, you know, talk about, you know, the carrot and stick formulation here is it's just really exciting to see how we can be working on both the operating carbon and the embodied carbon and move things further.
One thing that might be helpful for people, if you're working, you know, if you're a builder and you're working with somebody whose bank doesn't recognize the value, is that credit unions do sometimes. So you can sometimes get a mortgage, you know, extra money on a mortgage through them, when you wouldn't with one of the big banks.
Yeah, I would occur too. Vancity here in BC in Vancouver is just so remarkable for encouraging more sustainable developments and then also like showcasing it. You know, it's great that they want other community members in the bank and within the credit union to do these kinds of things, and they're out there with pom poms cheering people on. So it's great when you have a bank that wants to do good with good money. It's a different philosophy.
I think we should really take a moment, maybe just really, really, truly open the floor up to anybody who's still with us, who maybe wants to hop on for a second and ask a question, or even just chime in and say something.
Yeah, Leo, if you want to ask your question in person, go for it.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We do.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question was the let's see if I'm
Oh, I think you hit the
Whoops.
exit button faster than you wanted to.
Oh, maybe he was.
No, but I mean, the questions in the chat there, you know, the more resilient you build, the smaller, less expensive the total required mechanicals are too. And absolutely, I mean, we look at it as your mechanical budget. The first line item in your mechanical budget should be the air barrier. You know, the extra costs of going from Tyvek to poly to better membranes and tapes is where, you know, it should go. And then ideally, you know, what is your heating and cooling system? If you look at just mechanics or mechanical systems, I'm a big proponent of heat pumps because you're getting a 1-to-3 ratio of your energy input to output versus a radiant system that's just a 1-to-1. So, or electric based it's a 1-to-1.
I think to add to that, to look at when your HVAC engineer is doing that heat loss calc, look at what they're factoring in for air leakage.
Yeah.
Often for Ontario, the default is around 3.5 or 3.7. So if you reliably get below 1, or let's say 0.6, if that's your wheelhouse, if you can model that, you can get extreme changes in what that mechanical size is versus modeling at, you know, what is that? 5 times the amount of air leakage?
Yeah.
Comfort, just comfort. That's when I don't even try and explain air leakage. I just go with comfort. You know, if you've ever been sitting on the couch and, whew, is that chill? No, go with that.
Okay,
so
Leo's back. Leo,
Leo's
what's your
back.
question?
I guess my question was, um, if I'm building more resiliently, would I not also have just smaller mechanicals, less expensive? So is that not also an argument to just, I guess, push the money from that heated floor into your envelope?
Absolutely. And we already started kind of talking about this when you disappeared for a second, but I think it was early 2000s. I was doing an ICF project from footing to the trusses, and we had to basically reduce the mechanical system by 30% based on how airtight that building was probably going to be, just to prevent. I think it went from like I don't know, a 3.5 ton down to a 3 ton or whatever it was, anyways, just so that unit wouldn't short cycle. And that savings allowed us to upgrade the windows on that build, which brought down some more stuff as well. But yeah,
On
anytime you
that
can
note, oh, sorry, I just want to
go
say,
ahead.
like, I've seen a lot of times where we've, kind of designed the envelope to be more robust, and the modeling shows that we can seriously downsize those mechanicals, but they still get installed too big and the money gets spent because people don't trust the modeling. They don't believe that it's going to work. And so, like we definitely need to share our successful projects and like, make people understand that it actually does work, because you're basically throwing money away. If you're buying a $25,000 heat system that you're not going to use, it's pretty stupid.
Lori, I love that comment. And when people don't trust the system, I'm like, well, guess what? We're gonna put electrical cord somewhere where it needs to be, and that could be electric baseboard. If you don't like it or if it doesn't work, put an electric baseboard. I have yet to see one installed in our projects, but I've put like the level of comfort or pre-planning it. Unfortunately, it does affect the breakers and some of those kind of things. But when people bring that same comment up, I'm like, well, if you don't, you don't need to spend it now. You could just do this in case if you're not quite happy. And
worst case, you've got another outlet for the vacuum cleaner.
yeah, that's exactly it.
Get
the big one. Hey, Leo, I'm super excited. Where are you? Is that the ceiling above you? Is that the wall? Thank you for working late.
It is the embarrassingly messing job site of our Century Home renovation that I'm working on right now as we speak.
And where is this?
In Ontario, in Uxbridge. So
bravo.
I'm trying to applied zooming here, building science.
Love it.
So yeah,
it's wicked.
It's unfortunately, there was just mud in the walls beforehand. It's a single layer brick air gap, then 1 inch of board sheathing, old board sheathing. And so I've just I guess you can see it here in the corner, I guess, a little bit. Board sheathing, just put some Rockwool in, and we're doing my best to air seal. I've put spray foam in between the board sheathing to try and prevent wind washing of the insulation as much as I can.
Love it.
And the Ventella will be the as good as it can be air barrier with a house that was built in, we think, something like 1870, 1880 or something like that. So it's only 3.5, 4 inches of Rockwool, so it's not going to be great, but it'll be better than it was.
I think this is the epitome of building better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In the
Good on you,
given
Leo.
situation.
Yeah.
Good job, Leo.
Thank you. One more question. The previous owner put vinyl double hung windows in here. And I've always wondered, and as much as I hate these brush seals, I suddenly had, I don't know how one can see that, but the regular brush seals.
Yeah.
It suddenly occurred to me the wind coming through there, I wonder if that would be better, if like less wind, if that could be replaced with felt. Does anyone know of replacement seals for double hung windows that would be
No,
made out
it's
of felt?
so
there was a window that was put out with a felt seal in, I'm gonna say, the late 80s. It might have been early 80s. Every single one of them that I replaced, the felt was worn to the point where it was no longer viable. So it might, if you did find something, it might be a temporary win.
Yeah.
Personally, what I would look is when that window wears out, upgrade it.
I mean, they were all replaced, I think 2 years ago,
Okay.
3 years ago. So it's, I want to tear them out, but at the same time, the embodied carbon person
Yep.
in me says just leave them. And you know, yeah. Again, it wasn't my mistake.
So Leo,
and
it'd be great is again, as you know, when you're doing your blower door test, right? You're bringing out the red door of truth and you're looking at air leaks. What you can do too, right, is seal the window off, do a test, check on your envelope, see where it is, pull it off, see what the window
right,
issue is. And then when you think of European windows, I mean, they work because they have more gaskets. And so the
Yep.
question is for you is like, where could you put a gasket that still would look aesthetically pleasing? But I mean, it's a white window. You can easily get a white door stop to add it in there. And even if you either glued it in or figured out the right attachment so that, you know, when the window is down, that you've got that extra layer of protection. But at the same time too, you know, doing the blower test and verifying how that affects your overall air leakage, you know, you'd be like, okay, you know what, I can live with this, or I can fix it. But at least you've identified a critical area or a spot that might need to be fixed, and then you figure out what's the best solution. But your view of it all from a body carbon, you know what, great view of the situation.
yeah, we have one or two other windows that still need to be replaced, and those will definitely go with something that's not double hung, but maybe casement.
Yeah, tilt and turn, any European stuff. Yeah.
I
So
grew up in Austria, so I'm well familiar with tilt and turns.
Awesome.
One suggestion for you, where it is double hung, do you actually use the double hung function on a regular basis? Or do you just use it mostly as a single hung?
I find that whenever I open any of them to air out a space, I always open it top and bottom, because I find the actual air circulation is far superior than I just open the top or just open the bottom.
Okay. Well, just throwing this out there, if you
Yep.
decide that maybe that you don't necessarily need that,
Yep.
you can seal with caulking either the top or the bottom.
Yep.
And it eliminates that amount of leakage.
Yep.
It just basically cuts the operating size in half. It's not ideal, but it definitely does help.
I think that's and even just clear plastic packing tape would do that trick.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good idea. Maybe even just for the winter time when you're not opening to air out.
Yeah, a lot of cases, you know, people just put foil over the windows, you know, when they're, you know, in the wintertime. So same application would go for you as well.
They're modern double glazed windows. They're not terrible.
Yeah.
They're just not as good as a proper rubber gasketed seal. That's all.
Yeah.
And noise, like we hear the noise from the road through the air leakage. You hear the noise. It's probably the noise that bothers me more than the air leakage, because the air leakage is, you don't perceive it unless you're really next to it, but you do hear the noise across the room. And we're close to the road, which is how we know.
You might notice it a lot more, the air leakage a lot more now that you have insulation.
We will once we're done. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Leo.
No, thank you.
Element, did I see you turn your camera on a second ago? Maybe not. Luke, do you have any questions for us before we wrap up here?
If not, I think Robert did.
Sure,
had a
Robert,
question?
go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like how Robert said, "Do I have to go get another drink to ask me a question?" Well, that is actually it depends.
I'll tell you, I think it's a good question now.
Depends. Do you have to get a plane tomorrow, or are you good?
I just came back from Toronto today, so I'm good.
Then you can have another drink. No problem.
Okay, no problem.
Well, does anybody else anywhere?
Justin on board to talk about Saskatchewan. So it's another region that we didn't talk about. Justin, are you still on?
Yeah, sorry, we're letting you dive into oh, sorry, you want to get Justin in. Yeah, I wonder. Mr. Element himself.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
How's it going?
Hey, we miss you. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, you bet. I wasn't gonna miss tonight, that's for sure.
Well,
What part of Saskatchewan are you in, Justin?
The middle
So
part.
I live in Lumsden, which is about 20 minutes north of Regina. So we're definitely in the southern parts of, there we go. Southern part of Saskatchewan. We're 7A, so it's definitely cold enough. You betcha.
I've spent some time on the prairies, so I totally understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, for us, and we've had a chance to chat with you guys. We're really focused on showcasing the high performance building and what it can mean in Saskatchewan. The problem is we have such cheap gas that it's not easy to get everyone on board. But with the carbon taxes that everyone's starting to see on their bills, it's definitely becoming more of an interest. But kind of like you guys were going at, it's really not that much more to flip them over and showcase, hey, if we take this area out of your house and flip it over to your building envelope, we can save this on the back end. And to maybe comment on some of the financing, I've had some really good conversations with RBC on their interest in high performance building, and it's coming down the pipeline. It's not that far off, I don't think.
Well, again, the banks are becoming more aware of it, and it's really interesting. So, and yeah, great to have you on. And again, I mean, you're also an area too when we talk about the embodied carbon of things, is just the dirty grid, in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and being able to manage that part is important, right? Just by having a better sweater, not having to use so much dirty energy.
That's right.
So, Mr. Aaron, I do have a final tune to wrap us up with if you want to start winding things down.
Well, again, very grateful that everybody was able to come out tonight. I believe June 25th, the third Thursday of next month, will be our next show. And I'll probably be drinking something different than a maple cream ale. But again, just really thankful everybody's here. And I'm hoping we have a special guest to give us a little bit of a talk about energy. Hopefully more clearly than anything I could articulate. We had a brief conversation about Joule before this kicked off. And if you don't know what a Joule is, Google it. But yeah,
with watts. You can start with watts and then go to that.
A joule equals a watt per second.
Per second. Yeah, just to clarify.
Or 1 joule second equals a watt. And
I'm going to say parking
unit
lot.
of work. Parking lot?
Parking lot.
A joule is a unit of work. It is equal to 1 Newton over 1 meter. And we're going to leave it at that. It was supposed to be a back to the basics conversation, but
Yeah.
Connor fortunately reined me in and realized that I maybe was a little out of my own depth. So, anyways,
yeah. Well,
well,
my friend
no,
here.
it's true. We have to look after each other.
Yeah.
Start going down those rabbit holes. Somebody's got to pull you out. Anyways, if you would like to close the show out, Sean, with a little music from the Great White North, that would be awesome. And we'll call it a night.
Can you guys hear this?
Good day, welcome to the Great White North Canadian Corner. I'm Bob McKenzie, this is my brother Doug. How's it going, eh? And today's topic, what was it? How come Americans have twist off?
Well, it's energy, building science. Great to have everyone here. Good night, everyone. Enjoy the first episode of BS and Beer Canada. Take off, eh?
Guys.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Night, guys.
Yeah, guys.